And now we welcome Merav Michaeli, Member of Parliament in the Labour Party. Merav, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having
studio.
me.
So the coronavirus pandemic obviously is top of mind for all citizens, as of course is the current lockdown and the way it's impacting the lives of people all over the country. I was curious to know your thoughts about the way the public is trusting leaders in the country right now. Across the spectrum, we're seeing more and more cases of people, high-profile people, accused of flouting the rules. What, in your opinion, does this mean for citizens in this country who are looking to some kind of role models?
Well, I think it goes even further than the fact that there is no role model and no personal responsibility that's been taken by the people who decided on those very chaotic rules. To begin with, the public does not really believe the logic behind those rules. From the beginning, people saw that the expert that was brought by the government to be the big manager of coronavirus recommended one thing, but the government was unable to politically pursue the solution that he offered, and then that's why they went to something much more severe, much more complicated, and much heavier on people's lives. So I think the lack of trust and confidence, it starts even prior to the fact that then you see the people, as I said, who are the ones who made those weird and unacceptable decisions, do not listen to their own, set of rules.
And yet in the beginning, the first time the lockdown happened in this country, Israel was doing so well. In fact, other countries in the world were looking to Israel for answers. Where did it all go wrong? We're sitting now, the only country in the world with an official second lockdown at the moment. What went so horribly off plan?
Well, first of all, this is exactly the difference between when the public is trusting and is obedient, and not only obedient but cooperative. I mean, because really people took it very seriously, and the results were immediate. But it was a parallel to the time when Netanyahu, the Prime Minister Netanyahu, still didn't have a government. And so this sense of urgency that he transmitted to people on a nightly basis was very genuine to his own condition, his political condition. And the minute he got his government and he felt secure and safe, he got out there and said, well, it's all fine, guys, have fun. And people believed him, and they just, went out, and there was no order and no plan, no program in the coming out of the segregation the last time. And sickness spread. Now what happened is that people do not have the same trust that they had the first time. And also, it's one thing, for the first time to make this effort and pay the prices and pay the tolls that it takes, and it is a toll, emotionally, financially, of course, socially. And it's another to do it the other time, when you see that it is, again, as I said, politically driven and not necessarily for the good of the people or the good of the country. This is exactly the difference that we're seeing.
And right now, we're not only seeing an issue with the lack of trust, we're also seeing blatant defiance. There are rules right now, like them or don't like them. There are rules against large protests, and yet thousands of people have been coming out into the streets to voice their anger. We had jarring scenes just before Yom Kippur where the Western Wall was empty, but outside Balfour in Jerusalem, thousands of people were again taking a stand. How do you reconcile these stark different images at this crucial time in the pandemic?
Because what's happening now is that people are not only protesting Netanyahu as they did before, they're protesting the attempt to hurt their basic, very, very basic democratic right to protest. This is what's at stake here, and this is why people are taking to the streets in such huge numbers, because this is what they're fighting for now. Their very, very basic democracy. A government cannot legislate against protest that is against it. It is really completely non-democratic. You can urge people to try and avoid big protests. You can ask them and offer and suggest. You can call out to them to take into consideration the stakes. You cannot legislate against demonstrations that are against the government. This is just impossible. This is why people are taking to the streets in much larger numbers than they did before this legislation.
And what would you imagine then would be the end game for this protest action in terms of the impact it will have politically? When we look at the latest polls, the right is getting stronger. Benjamin Netanyahu may be losing some kind of support, but Naftali Bennett and Yamina are looking stronger, and the left isn't really making any capitalizing on the gains that could be made right now. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think generally speaking, it's too soon to tell, because there's listen, the tragedy that happened to Israel in the last, what happened in the last government is that a huge camp that gave all of its energy and its voice to the people who promised not to go with Netanyahu and to replace him have turned on their voters and gave their mandates to Netanyahu. So the political camp, this political camp, is now crushed and really has no address, really has no leadership. And those people are actually, really they don't know who to vote for right now. And I have no doubt that when it will be clear to us when the elections will take place, because part of the problem is that you never know when the elections will take place.
That's for sure.
And it's hard to organize when you are in such in a limbo, kind of. There's no doubt in my mind that there will be a new address and new leadership that will attract all of those lost voices that right now are just, sort of pondering and wondering. And my job is to make sure that labor is reconstructed. It's out of the government, it's with new leadership, and it is a part of rebuilding that political camp that is so needed.